Hi, I'm Deborah Hamilton, and this is the Met Community Call for April 12th, 2023. I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, especially since so many things are changing with respect to my dog, Junie, that I need to update his pages. So I'm going to chat for a little while this evening and then check in with all the attendees to see if, in fact, they have updated their plan at what's really working and going on with Junie and what's really working and going on with your pets. Because to be sure that everyone knows how to care for your pet, we need to always update those plans. So I'm so glad to see Connie here and Susan here. And of course, Rose is always here. We're so glad for her. It's interesting because my Junie has become very growly, and I don't tolerate growly in my house. That doesn't go over well with me. However, I've realized there's something not right. I immediately, because I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, go to brain tumor, because that's just who I am. But we have scanned his head, and although there's a very small nub that's called a brain in his head, there's nothing else there of concern. He has been a pillar to post kind of guy. So he has moved 3 times since he was born, 4 if you count this house. He has gone off to trainers, which, you trust your trainers, you check them out, verify that they're good. So I don't presume anything untoward happened to him there. And he went off to his handler. And as Connie had pointed out last time, if you send a dog with a handler, you should send all of the contact information for your caregivers with them. So, hey, Sally, how are you? We are talking tonight about updating the care of your pets, their idiosyncrasies, because they change almost weekly, and especially if they're older, like Athena and Roxy. But I was sharing that Junie has become a little growly, and it was first we thought that he was growly because he was protecting me from all the terrible people in my life, including my husband and my sons. And we reacted appropriately when he did it. We pushed him away. Well, I pushed him away and put him down, and told him that was unacceptable. However, it hasn't necessarily corrected itself. So we are going for a full physical, and we're going to a chiropractor because there's a little inclining in my head that so of course, Sally, you might not have tuned in. As I was saying, I of course go to the major, trouble, a brain tumor, right? That's why he's acting stupid. But we had him checked for that, and there is a little bit of a brain there, and no tumor, so we're good. So we're trying to figure out what is going on. So I'm telling you all of this because I need to update my notes about Junie in my MAAP plan, because I need to tell people that he gets a little growly if you get in his face. If you get right down in his face, he gets a little growly. And I don't really tolerate that. So we are working on it. It's a work in progress. And it's interesting because he began doing it with my husband and my sons over Christmas. And now if I get in his face and he's sleeping on the bed, he does it to me. So we have to figure out. So I want you to tell you all of this because this can happen to anyone. It's not as if, oh, well, you're a bad owner, your dog is growly or bitey or whatever. These things happen. And I can tell you that, this dog has changed homes 4 times. He's been with a handler, and he's been with a hunt handler as well. He's been away from home. There are so many things that have occurred with him that I'm trying to think if it's environmental, or if it's just something going on with him. So we're going to visit a chiropractor in New Bern, hopefully in the next month or 2. She has a very long list, and I'm glad she's even going to put me on the list, so I can see if there's something there that's just not right, because a lot of our dogs are very stoic, and meeting aggression with aggression never works. Never works. So you need to really figure out what's going on. So having said that, as I said, I need to update, because if someone comes over and cares for Junie, they need to know, please don't go in his face. He's just going to do something, and I want you to be safe. He's never bitten anyone. However, he has made a wonderful attempt at my son Thomas. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's concerning to me. And so we're going to take some action to see what's going on. We're going to go through the health issues first, and then we're going to work with someone to figure out what's going on. But that's why we're having this topic tonight, because I know that a number of us talk about, well, we give our heartworm on the 1st and the 15th, and we feed this kind of food, and we, walk them on a leash, and they come when they're called. But these little idiosyncrasies that may embarrass us, that may really, they'll go pee in a new person's house or something like that, you really need to talk about, because those are the things that are going to come back, no pun intended, to bite your dog in the ass if you don't let somebody know. If they don't get along with cats, if they don't get along with cats, please don't say, well, I don't know, they've never really seen cats. If they've seen a cat and they go to the end of the leash and go into orbit, I would venture to say they're not going to get along well with a cat. Now, somebody might be very wonderful and can desensitize the dog to cats. I am not that person. I'm raising my hand. So I just keep them apart. But it really is important. Thunder, lightning, strangers, your dog could be the sweetest dog in the world. And if a stranger comes in the house, they could feel very threatened, or they could protect you. We've talked at length about what happens at the end of a leash. A dog that would greet another dog or another person gleefully in, say, a dog park or in your backyard or in their backyard may not do the same on a leash, because of that need to protect themselves, protect you. So I know that Connie's shaking her head, because I know with terriers, it's the same. You really have to be aware of, their individual personalities, which are breed specific. However, Irish setters are supposed to be sweet and loving and wonderful. And so that doesn't mean he isn't sweet and loving and wonderful. He has a bit of a blip, and we're going to find out what that blip is and accommodate him, or get him over it. We're trying to figure out what that is. And it's not with blasting him or doing anything like that. It's probably with finding out if he hurts. And I know when I brought him to the vet last time, I was worried that his neck hurt. And because he had hit the end of one of my flexi leads, something that no one should ever put a dog on. I know it's really easy to walk dogs on a flexi, and when they're older, like Athena and Roxy, that's fine, because they're not going to hit it at 90 miles an hour. But when you have a really young, healthy dog, flexis can be really dangerous. And he was on a flexi and hit the end. My husband likes to walk him on a flexi, and who knows if he hurt himself. I don't know, but we're going to check that out. So I'm going to check in with everybody, see how all the kids are doing. I'm going to start with you, Susan. How's Maggie? How's everything going? You have to unmute, or I can't hear a word.
Yeah, she's good. My husband's been out a lot this week, so it's been kind of cute. She sits at the door waiting for him, and she cries a little bit, and she still has her biting ways. I tried to bring in a package from outside, and she was quick to go for my hand. It was food, so I presume she was, because it was food,
Yeah.
But
it was hers, not yours.
Yeah. And Dr. Tobias has a harness that he claims is really wonderful for protecting the thyroid. I don't know if if Junie had a collar on when
he did have a collar on. The flexi was on a collar. So
yeah.
He did a real neck jerk. So, I mean, it could be all of that. Who knows? There are so many things that could be responsible for this, or he could just be getting stupider with old age. And that's a possibility too.
Well, doggies do have Alzheimer's. They have their own version of,
yep. They think so many things. Yep.
Yeah. And I applaud you for going to the chiropractor, because I think that could be really wonderful. And I wanted to do that for my dogs, but I couldn't find someone.
Does your vet not have an affiliation with a chiropractor? Usually they do.
Not that I'm aware of, no, but I mean, this was a few years ago too, so I don't know.
Well,
if
they're popping up everywhere. And I have to say that I loved my chiropractor in Pleasantville, Sue Lesser, who turned me on to chiropractic. And I presume that at least for Roxy, the reason she's as good as she is that she went to Sue Lesser for a significant amount of her life. And I know that Sally is continuing what we did before. So she's massaging the dog. She's, doing everything that needs to be
Oh,
done.
wow.
And I think she's also possibly finding a chiropractor. So let me check in with Sally and see how the older women are doing. I know that it's 80 degrees in New York today after being 20 degrees last week. So there is nothing to this global warming phenomenon at all.
Well, actually, I just turned off my video and my audio because my husband was leaving the studio, and I said, please take another fan. Athena has one. Roxy needs one blowing exactly on her too.
Yeah.
The girls are good. Unfortunately, I waited too long to walk them in the morning, and I could tell they were getting warm, and tried to walk them in the river, and Athena's okay and Roxy's not okay. And of course, I know there's bacteria in the river, so I'm apprehensive about that. But interesting, on the topic you were talking about earlier, Deborah, with Junie, we have a neighbor that has 2 greyhounds, and they're rescue dogs, and they were great dogs, and they moved into the neighborhood. Everybody walked, everybody got along just fine. And then whenever another dog would come, they kind of stand to the side and walk up a driveway and kind of shelter the 2 greyhounds. Well, now the 2 greyhounds are totally protective of the lady, and nobody can get near the greyhounds, and the male greyhound barks like crazy. So it's just in a matter of months, I've seen this huge personality change where all the dogs got along and they'd come up and sniff and greet one another. That doesn't happen any longer. They just run up a driveway or run into a yard to get away from all the other dogs. I don't know why they did that, but because they did that, now the dogs both bark like crazy when any other dog comes. So they have changed their dogs' personalities.
And
Better.
And you and I have talked about Roxy's change in personality during COVID, because I didn't run up a driveway, but I never said hello to anybody, which I always said hello to people before. Yeah. But during COVID, nobody was saying hello. Everybody was waving from 9 feet away. And Roxy definitely picked up the I don't like white dog syndrome during COVID. And, we have to be aware of that and always let people know that white dogs are not really safe around Roxy for a reason that escapes me and escapes you, because it wasn't like there was a white dog. Well, actually, there was a white dog that we passed who would bark at her at the house down the street. So maybe that's it. But in any event, you're right. If you do that, you pull your dogs away, they do get to be a little, they're wondering why you're doing it. I think in their pea brain, they're saying, I wonder why my parents are doing this. And it must mean that dog or those people are not nice. And so I need to make sure that I stay away from them as well. And it does shift their personalities. It's, they pick up on our energy. And if our energy creates a standoff, that's a problem. I have 2 Great Danes who walk the street here in, on River Drive. And the owner was walking it one day. Junie was out and he went down to say hello, and she went into orbit. And so I called Junie back, and of course he's very good. He comes right back. He wasn't causing any issue. But from that moment on, her dogs, because she went into orbit, she said, it's really strange. They just hate your dog. And I was going to say, well, it was because of the way you reacted to Junie, and I can understand because he wasn't on a leash and it was coming off my lawn and it was in front of my house. However, I can understand that. But her reaction put that in their mind that this dog is an issue. And now when she's walking them, there are 2 reasons why I go down the driveway. One is the dogs definitely don't like Junie. I've seen that, but she has no control over them. So it's not as if I think if one of them decided to pull her down the street to engage with Junie, that she would be able to stop them. I don't know why people of my age, because she's my age, would walk two Great Danes at the same time. But she does. And so it makes me a little worried. And so now Junie will probably gain some, reticence to see these dogs again. Although I must say, the neighbors are really mesmerized by the fact that they will walk up calling his name and he will be on bunny or squirrel patrol. And so they could really go straight into the devil's lair and he would not give a patootie because, call my name, great. Want to give me a treat? Great. Want to pet me? Great. I have nothing to do with you. There are squirrels or bunnies on this street and I need to make sure I don't miss a one. So Connie, I see you shaking your head because I know the terriers are like that too. Single-minded.
Oh, totally. And of course, we have evil squirrels that live in my monster pine tree in the backyard. In fact, as you can see, winter has returned to Southern California, even though 2 days ago,
in the 60s and 40s and we're in the 80s, but it's okay.
Right. And 2 days ago, it was absolutely gorgeous. I was in, short sleeve t-shirts and all my windows were open. So, here we are. And it was raining again this morning, albeit not heavily, fortunately. But my kids are selectively on squirrel patrol. Today we had rain up until just really about an hour ago from the time we got up. But the two of them, after they, ate and did their thing, passed out because what else do you do on a rainy day? And one of the squirrels in the yard came right up to the back patio door, probably, poor thing, looking to get in out of the rain. Patsy was asleep on the sofa on her back, just doing the John Travolta Saturday Night Fever routine, and with her front leg. And Casey was in the study, passed out underneath the wing chair behind me. They had no clue there was a squirrel at the back door trying to get in. Had they done so, they would have been through the glass. Yeah. But at any rate, on the subject of personality change, of course, I have shared multiple times how my very well socialized dogs have become very clingy during the COVID shutdown. And of course, we were without dog shows for a year and a half. We didn't even have obedience class because all the LA County parks where we train were shut down. And it's been, really only since August of last year that things have really started to open up again. So there were definite personality changes there. But another factor that I want to throw into the mix, COVID aside, everything else aside, is that contrary to popular folklore, dogs have a very long attention span and remember everything. And anybody who has trained a dog for either show or certainly for performance sports like obedience, rally, agility, where you're giving active commands, herding, will understand that dogs remember everything they're taught and then some. They learn on their own. And a case in point is Miss Patsy, who's at my feet. In her puppy socialization class when she was about 4 months old, got jumped pretty violently. He was enthusiastic, not vicious, but got jumped very enthusiastically by a male lab puppy who thought that she was just gorgeous. And she was terrified. So forever after, when she sees a large black dog, regardless of the breed, she goes berserk. And at dog shows, when I would, just be walking her to the ring for my setup, I would have to keep her very close to avoid going by black labs, Rottweilers, Bernese mountain dogs, any other mostly or all black dogs.
Yeah.
And she really hadn't been around black dogs for a long time until over Easter weekend. My neighbor had a whole bunch of family in and they were socializing in the backyard. And one of the visiting dogs was a Rottweiler who was very nicely mannered and came right up to the fence to say hi to mine. And she went nuts.
And she was stupid, right?
She went absolutely nuts. So, and she was first jumped 8.5 years ago. She's 9 years old and she was jumped when she was a 4-month-old puppy. So they remember everything
Everything.
good and bad. And so even one bad experience is something that you either have to desensitize them to, or they just plain flat out don't get over it, and you have to avoid the situation where you can.
I have to tell you that the other thing that came home with Junie, I'm not sure if it was from hunting training or championship exhibition with the handler, was that when I went to put on his collar, he would put his head down and roll over. And I'm like, qu'est-ce que c'est? Why are you like afraid of me putting your collar on? And we have worked through that beautifully. We get a treat, we do this, we do that. It's a big joke. He still has a little bit of reticence to the collar, but he's no longer running away from me, getting on the ground, rolling over as if I'm about to burn him with hot coals. So, you know, we don't consider that our dogs experience things in ways that we don't know, and they can experience things. So Connie was with her dog when she had that experience, but what if that dog was out with a handler and had that experience? If the handler
Right.
doesn't share that information with Connie, she's going to wonder why black dogs are no longer persona gratis when they come into the yard. What the heck happened? So that's why when we talk about the needs of your pet, it must go beyond food and medication and, you know, thunder and lightning and, you know, fenced in yard or good on a leash or bad on a leash or whatever. Really, if they have these idiosyncrasies, do not be embarrassed to say, you know, they might bite you if you do this, because the result of not telling someone that is that they get bitten. And then you're in a whole nother hornet's nest of issues. And maybe your dog will be put down, especially if you can't care for it anymore. It might be put down because what else? What else does it have that she didn't tell us about or he didn't tell us about? So it's always better to pre-pave a positive experience. So when I suggested that Junie has an issue, I also suggested there are things to be done. There are situations that I might not be aware of that I have to sort of flesh out, either by asking questions of the hunt trainer or the handler. And, you know, I'm not so sure, and this is the interesting part, I'm not so sure that anybody would tell me if he had a really bad experience with something, or they might not even remember. It might not be intentional. They might not remember that he, you know, pulled away from them and they jerked him once. And he's a super sensitive dog. So you jerk him once, and as Connie rightly said, he's going to remember for the rest of his life. So that's why if you go to put a collar on, he's like, holy shit, they're going to jerk me again. So these are the kind of things that are so important to share, because your dog and their happiness, if something happens to you and they need to go somewhere else, is directly related to how much really important, really gravity information you share with the new caregivers. Again, I can't stress it enough that you have to tell the new caregivers that they are your caregivers. You know, we say this all the time, right? That they need to know each other and they need to know everything about your pets. That doesn't seem to have been the modus operandi for several friends who passed away with dogs. They had people lined up for the care of their pet who didn't even know they were in line for the care of their pet. Sally was one of them. So it really is important that not only should you tell the person that you've put them on the list, you should share with them the information about your pet fully. You know, don't say, well, I don't want them to think that he's going to bite them in the face. I remember I had an Irish setter when my boys were young. So Drew maybe was 5, because maybe he was 6, and Tom was 3. And I had this wonderful dog, Ralph, who was Violet's brother. And Ralph just decided to start giving, and some of you may know what this means. Susan, you might not. They just giving the boys the hairy eyeball. And they were bigger than my boys because he was a good 80-pound Irish setter. So he was going to turn 2. And I said, well, if I can't trust him, you see my legal background coming in, if I can't trust him, I can't give him away. because, that's just not right. Don't give your problem to somebody else unless they're highly trained, highly skilled, have full disclosure and sign a release. I mean, there's so much you have to do. So I'll never forget, it was my husband's 40th birthday, and one of his friends from St. Louis came in and she loved my dogs, and she said, "How are Ralph and Violet?" And I said, "Well, Violet's doing great, and I'm putting Ralph to sleep next week." She goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, because he just isn't, in my opinion, I've given him every opportunity known to man, and with the boys being young, I can't take the chance, and I can't place him. I just don't feel good placing him. If I can't trust him, nobody should have him." And it turns out that she took him. And I found out many years later, when he was around 11 or 12, that he had bitten her in the face several times. So my inclining was correct, that he was not, but to her detriment, when I gave her the dog, I said, "If he does anything untoward, call me. I'll come and get him, and I will, make sure he's safe. And you don't need to keep him." And of course, she never called me because she must have thought I would have put him to sleep, which maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would have done what I'm doing with Junie. Who knows? However, she then said, "Well, it was my fault." So I know, Connie, you're going to spin on your chair. It was my fault because I know better than to get into bed after he's asleep in the bed. And I said, "I love my dogs. I do. I love them. But, when I get into bed, that means you need to move, because this is my bed and your bed is either on the floor. Now, if you'd like to come back up after I'm settled, I am happy to let you back up once I'm settled. But there is no growling. There is no gnashing of teeth when you go to bed." And she said, "Well, I got into bed and I went to kiss him and he whipped around." And I said, "Well, you needed to call me when he did that," which of course she didn't. So I don't know if any of you have heard of situations like that or who have experienced that. I think, Susan, maybe you might have experienced that. I know, Sally, you have as well, because the girls tend to think they are together, clearly in charge, and you and Gordon are just the help. However, that shouldn't be the way. And Connie, I don't know if you've had that with your guys, if they've ever done that. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, if anything, of course, if I get up out of bed, they immediately settle into my warm spot to keep it warm for me. But the minute they see me coming back, they will scoot over, including Princess Patsy at my feet. Her mother, always
Okay.
gave me lots of room. And Casey is on and off the bed because he gets hot and then he gets cold and then he gets hot. But he mostly sleeps in his crate, which is in the bedroom. So, and he's in and out of that. So and with any of my other Wheatons, I have never, ever, ever had a problem.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, they know that, I'm the mom and that's why. And
Otherwise known as the AB.
Right.
A bitch.
And absolutely. And you have to do that from day one, from the time they're puppies.
Yep.
If there were any kind of altercations in the kitchen, particularly with a young pup trying to go raid one of the older Wheaton's food bowls, which went over like a lead balloon, I would always intervene and I would discipline both of them and say, "I'm not having this. This is my kitchen, not yours." And it would stop. Yeah. So it's just like being a human mom. You have to set the boundaries. You have to give them structure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Susan or Sally, you want to chime in?
Well, the only time I ever had an experience like that, I went and picked up the dog, and my husband was working overseas for 6 months, and then he came home, and the dog, Pollyanna, would sleep on one side of the bed and I'd sleep on the other side of the bed. And then my husband came home and he walked upstairs, and the second he walked into the bedroom, Polly showed all her teeth, and it's like, "Don't get near Sally." But that was fine for that night. He said, "That's okay. I'll sleep on the couch." But we trained her, and she had known nothing other than me. And all of a sudden there was a stranger coming. So we could understand why that happened. And then we dealt with it and it was fine. It took a little time, but it was fine.
Yeah, you just have to recognize that it's not acceptable, that he's not going to sleep on the couch for the rest of his life, unless, of course, that's something that we can talk about on another night. However, we have to let our spouses, our significant others, or anybody who comes to our house who, we want to spend time with, get into our space. And I know that, dogs tend to get possessive of people in space, and it takes a great deal of time to desensitize them, but not completely, because, if the burglar comes in, you certainly want them to alert you and not welcome them. A lot of people say, well, my dog will show them where the jewels are, which is fine as long as you're not one of the jewels. I would like my dog to bark at a stranger if they come into my room or into my house. I would like that. I would like them to bark in a way that would make them maybe think twice. In fact, I always suggest to everyone I talk to that if your dog barks at someone coming into the house, and they say, are they friendly? This is the lawyer in me. Well, they're friendly when I'm here, because I never want to let someone know that they're so friendly that they can come back and come into my house and burglarize it, because my dog is friendly. We want to make sure that they're friendly while we're here, but they are a dog and this is their house. And if we weren't home, I have no idea what they would do, because you want to not necessarily make all the workmen know that your dog is super friendly. Junie has met every single one of the builders here, and every single one of the builders here he first barks at. He is very, I wouldn't say cautious. He's thoughtful about walking up to them. He says hello, and then he leaves them alone. And I think that's the clearest way for them to understand, okay, I'm allowed to be here while my parents are here. I'm not so sure that this is a person who I would let in when my parents aren't here. And I really want that to be the case, because I know he won't bite anyone, because that's just not his thing. I told you guys about the 2 blue jays who fell from the tree, and he caught one, and one fell on his head and the other fell in his mouth, because that's how lucky that blue jay was. And it fell on the ground. I thought it was dead. I was going to go back and get it to bring it to, the wildlife rehabilitator. And when I went back, it was gone, because it played possum. And he never heard it because his mouth is so soft. So the fact that he would, bite someone is probably an enigma to him. However, he's having these issues. So we're addressing it. Susan, I'm going to wrap up with you. What do you think?
Maggie loves to jump in the bed with me, and sometimes she jumps right on top of me, and she loves to get her cuddles. And it's one of the few times when I can feel warmly toward her, because she barks so much and can be so disruptive around the house. And she has improved. We're using the spray bottle, and
Oh, good.
yeah, I'm very happy to say she has improved, and I want to get moving forward with her in a more positive direction. So,
Very important.
very important. And, because Tom was not well, and it was very upsetting to me. I think that was a trigger for her that led to some of the behaviors. And so I think we're dialing it back quite a bit, and I'm hopeful.
And that's how we have to stay, because I'm hopeful with Junie too. As you can see, he's telling me it's after 7 o'clock, get off the call. And I don't listen to him. He does this often during my day. And it's a double-edged sword, because thankfully I get up every 2 hours or so. Otherwise I would probably sit here for 7 hours. And also I never get up when he asks me, because I don't ever want to create that Pavlov's dog scenario, because then when you're doing work and you have to stay, they get even more insistent. Not that any of our dogs are insistent or let us know what they want ever. Never. All dogs do. All dogs learn what it is that'll get us to do what they want. And anybody who thinks that, while you're training your dog isn't training you, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn, because they are definitely training you as much as you're training them. And it's that mutual thing. So for tonight's topic, I'm so glad you were here. Any closing thoughts about, making sure that when you address the needs of your pet, you go above and beyond just the rudimentary things? I feed them 2 cups of dog food. This is the dog food I feed. I give heartworm on the 1st and the 15th. I blah, 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 whatever it is. Give me your last thoughts, because I just think it was so important to go into temperament and idiosyncrasy and patterning, because our dogs are not going to stop being themselves. And they may actually, if they go into a kennel or into a shelter or into a different situation with dogs or without dogs. I know that when I would give my dogs to someone, and they had always been part of a pack, there was a real learning curve for them to be alone. Huge learning curve for them to be alone. So any last thoughts about what kind of things you're going to include about your dogs that are unique to your dogs that somebody might not know? I'm going to start with you, Con.
Well, I think, well, you touched on one of them. My dogs for generations have always been pack dogs, at least 2, if not 3. And sometimes there was a cat or 2 thrown in. It just really depends, pardon me, on the unique personality quirks of your dog. But you've got to be really, really explicit.
And honest. Yep.
And totally honest. For instance, my dogs, as long as they can see, they either know the people or they can see that I have a particular demeanor toward them. If, for instance, family or friends come in the house, and sometimes they can be totally new, either family or friends. And some of them, like my grandnephews, who are both teenagers now, and 6'5", 6'6", come in the house, and I'm thinking, oh my God, and I'm watching my dogs to see how they'll react. Well, they're fine, and both the boys have a Malamute of their own, so they're very dog savvy. So my dogs are perfectly friendly. They have welcomed in, very tall male friends of mine for social events whom they have never seen before, and they've been perfectly fine. But my gardener of 20 years, every week when he comes, they're ready to just jump through the window and kill him. So they take a very different attitude toward workmen from, social types of people. So that is something that I need to include in my MAAP plan.
Perfect. Susan?
I think just to emphasize that behind the barking and the resource guarding and all the apparently bad behaviors is a very sweet dog who, if you try to give her affection and love, she will respond to that, and you will see the good side of her.
Right.
It's important not to get too locked into the
naughty
negative stuff.
To the naughty, and recognize that underneath that exterior, she can actually hold a very nice conversation with someone.
Yeah. Definitely.
Awesome. Sally?
I think it's been said very clearly tonight. And one thing is, if you can meet with the caregiver or the kennel, and if you have a 1-page typed up list, and you can go over each point with them to make sure it's clear and that they do understand. That's my input.
It really is important. Communication. I'm doing a paper now for a conference with vets coming up at the end of April, and really communication and being able to listen in communication is so clear too. So not only do you have to tell them, but then do me the favor, from my mediation background, check in whether or not they heard you. So what did I say about Patsy and Casey and Maggie and Athena and Roxy? What did I say so that they heard you and that you have made them aware? So until next week, this is Deborah Hamilton Law Mediation, the Why Do Pets Matter podcast, and of course, this wonderful MAAP community that I love. Kiss your dogs for me. And remember, make that plan and be specific about the needs of your pet. Until next week, take care.